Good morning, St. Anne's Church. John Stonecipher here. And it was 40 years ago that I met Daryl Davis when we were both young musicians here in Washington, D.C. And over the past 8 or 10 months, we've been working to have Mr. Daryl Davis come join us. And after I reconnected with him, after learning about a film on his work that was highlighted, featured at the South by Southwest Film Festival, it is now my privilege to introduce him to St. Anne's this day. Mr. Daryl Davis.
Thank you, John, and welcome. It's a real pleasure to be here and be reconnected with John and see everybody here that's on this wonderful Sunday. Hope everyone's doing well, and I will certainly keep everybody whose name I see in the chat room in my prayers as well. So today I want to talk about listening and the importance of it and how it can work, how it can impact, and how we can bring people on opposite ends of the spectrum just a little bit closer together and perhaps even close that gap. And I'm going to give you some examples of extreme division, which perhaps many of you may not encounter in your own lives, but you do have some division here and there, maybe even at the dinner table because someone voted for one person, somebody voted for another person, and they don't talk to each other. I've heard a lot of stories about things like that. I don't have that problem myself, but I do have some other problems which I'm going to share with you right now. When I'm age 62, but when I was 10 years old, I was in a Cub Scout march in a place called Belmont, Massachusetts, in which I was the only Black participant in the march. I was age 10 in 4th grade. And we were celebrating we were marching from Concord to Lexington, Massachusetts, right outside of Belmont, where I lived. And we were commemorating the ride of Paul Revere. And everything was going along smoothly, no problems, till we got to a certain point in the march when I began getting hit with bottles and soda pop cans and rocks and just general debris from the street by just a small group of spectators off to my right. I remember there being a couple of kids, maybe my age, maybe a year or two older, and a couple of adults who were throwing things. And because I had never had anything like this happen to me before, my first thought was, oh, these people over here on the sidewalk, they don't like the Scouts. That's how naive I was. And it wasn't until my Scout leaders, my den mother, Cub master, and troop leader, all came running over and covered me with their bodies and escorted me out of the danger. And I kept saying, I didn't do anything. Well, why are they doing this? And all they would do is just kind of shush me and rush me along. And they never answered the question. So when I got home, my mother and father, who were not present at the parade, were asking me and putting Band-Aids on me and asking me, how did I fall down and get all scraped up? And I explained to them, that I did not fall down. I told them exactly what had happened. And for the first time in my life, my folks sat me down and explained to me what racism was. And believe it or not, at the age of 10, I had never heard the word racism. I had no clue what they were talking about. Now, let me give you a reason for that. My parents were in the U.S. Foreign Service, so I spent a lot of time overseas, living in different countries. We would be in a country for 2 years, and then we would come back home here to the States. We'd be here for a few months, maybe a year, and then be transferred back overseas again to another country. So I grew up as an American embassy brat. And my classes back then, we're talking back in the 1960s, my classes back then overseas were filled with kids from all over the world. My classmates were Nigerian, Japanese, Russian, French, German, Australian, Swedish, you name it. If they had an embassy in those countries, all of their kids went to the same school. And I can tell you something. Sometimes, we didn't speak the same language, but we all learned to play together, work together, have slumber parties together. We all were kids. We loved one another. We had fun. We got along. And it wouldn't be until I would return home. Every time I come back home, I'd run into an issue because of the color of my skin. Now, today I'm a professional musician, and I travel around the country performing and around the world performing. Not, of course, now during lockdown, but in general, that's what I do for a living. Between traveling with my parents and traveling on my own now as an adult, when you combine those two sets of travels together, I have been in a total of 57 different countries on 6 continents. I've been exposed to a multitude of colors of skin, religions, ethnicities, cultures. And I can tell you something, all of that has impacted me and shaped my perspectives on who I am and how I treat other people. Because I tell you one thing that I found out, when I come back home and I assess where I've been and who I've run into, no matter how far I've gone from this country, right next door to, say, Canada or Mexico, or halfway around the world to the other side of the earth, no matter how many different people I run into, how they may look different, how their cultures may differ from my own, I've concluded one thing. They all are human beings. And basically, we all want the same 4 or 5 things. We want to be loved. We want to be respected. We want to be heard. We want to be treated fairly. And we want the same thing for our family as anybody else wants for theirs. As long as we keep those things in mind and practice those things, we can navigate pretty much in any society, with any group, be it adversarial or otherwise. And this is what comes down to listening. So at that age, after that had happened, when my parents told me why this was happening, I did not believe them, because I'd been all over the world. I'd gotten along with everybody, every shade of color. And nobody had treated me like that, throwing rocks at me and bottles and stuff. So I had no reason to really believe them, because I had no precedent for it. And my 10-year-old brain could not wrap itself around the idea that somebody who had never seen me, never spoken to me, knew absolutely nothing about me, would want to hurt me for no other reason than the color of my skin. So basically, I did not believe my parents. Well, about a month and a half, almost 2 months later, on that same year, in 1968, on April the 4th, Martin Luther King was assassinated. And every major city in this country burned to the ground. The cities were on fire. And it was then that I realized my parents had not lied to me. They told me the truth, that this thing that I'd never heard of called racism did exist. So now I accepted its existence, but I did not understand why did it exist. How can people hate like that? So I formed a question in my own mind at that age, which was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And for the next 52 years, I've been seeking the answer to that question. I bought books as a teenager through my adult years on Black supremacy, on white supremacy, on the Ku Klux Klan, on anti-Semitism, on the Nazis in Germany, on the neo-Nazis over here, all trying to get some understanding how this happens. Well, all these books talked about it, but none of them really answered the question. So I was still on my quest to find the answer. Well, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. One night I was playing, I graduated college with my degree in music, in jazz performance. And I've been a professional musician ever since. So country music had made a resurgence. And there'd been a movie out called Urban Cowboy with John Travolta. And it was a big hit movie. So all the bars and clubs, that were playing top 40 music, they changed their format to country. And I wanted to work full-time in the music industry, so I played country. And country music, I like country music. It's very simple to play. It's no different than the blues, same 3 chords. And I joined a country band. The country band was pretty much established around my area. And it was an all-white band, and I was the only black guy in the band. So we played a place up in a town called Frederick, Maryland. And there was a bar there called the Silver Dollar Lounge. And the Silver Dollar Lounge was known as an all-white bar. Not that black people could not go in, but black people chose not to go in. And it was a good choice, because when you go somewhere where you're not welcome and alcohol is being served, it's not a good combination. So they stayed out of there. And here I was in the Silver Dollar Lounge. My first time in there. The band had been there many times before to perform. So we came off the bandstand after the first set, and I was walking across the dance floor to go sit down at the table with the bandmates when I felt somebody from behind put their arm around my shoulder. And I don't know anybody in this place. So I'm turning around to see who's touching me. And it was this white gentleman, maybe 15 to 18 years older than me. And he says, "Man, I sure like your all's music." I said, "Thank you, I appreciate that." And I shook his hand, and he points at the stage and he says, "I've seen this here band before, but I ain't never seen you before. Where did you come from?" And I explained to the guy that I had just joined the band. It was my first time there. And he says, "Man, I sure like your piano playing. This is the first time I ever heard a black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis." Now, I was not offended, but I was rather surprised that this individual, being older than me, same place that I did, from black, blues, and boogie-woogie piano players. That's where rock and roll, rockabilly came from. Well, the man was incredulous. He didn't believe me. Even after I told him, I said, "Look, I know Jerry Lee Lewis. Jerry Lee is a good friend of mine. He's told me himself." He didn't believe that either. But he was so fascinated with me that he invited me back to his table to have a drink. Well, I don't drink alcohol, but I went back to his table and I had a cranberry juice. He paid the waitress, and he took his glass and he clinks my glass and cheers me. And he says, "You know, this is the first time I ever sat down and had a drink with a black man." Now I'm really mystified. Like, how could this be? Because at my age, I had sat down literally with thousands of white people or anybody else and had a meal, a beverage, a conversation. And this man had never done that. How can this be? So innocently, I asked him, I said, "Why?" And he didn't answer me. He stared down at the tabletop. And I asked him again, and his buddy sitting next to him elbowed him and said, "Tell him, tell him, tell him." And I said, "Tell me." He looked back at me just as plain as day, and he said, "I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan." Well, I burst out laughing at him, because now I did not believe him. I have read every book on the Klan. As I told you, I bought them all and trying to find out these answers. And none of my books talked about how a Klansman would come up and hug a black guy and want to buy him a drink and praise his piano playing and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't work that way. So, this guy's pulling my leg. So I'm laughing. And he goes inside his pocket, produces his wallet, and hands me his Klan membership card. I looked at this thing, whoa. I recognized the Ku Klux Klan emblem, which is a red circle with a white cross and a red blood drop in the center of the cross. And this thing was for real. So I stopped laughing and I gave it back. And we talked about the Klan and some other things. And he gave me his phone number and wanted me to call him whenever I was to come back to this bar and play with this band so he could bring his friends, meaning Klansmen and Klanswomen, to come and see the black guy who played like Jerry Lee Lewis. So I call him every 6 weeks and say, "Hey man, we're going to be down at the Silver Dollar this weekend. Come on down." He'd come both nights, Friday and Saturday, and he'd bring Klansmen and Klanswomen to see me play. And they didn't come in robes and hoods, right? They came in regular street clothes. And they'd gather around the stage and watch me play. And then they'd get out on the dance floor and dance. And then during the break, I'd make my way over to his table to say hello. Some of them were curious about me and they would hang there and, want to talk to me. Others would see me coming and they would get up and scurry across the room and go stand somewhere else. It was like, they wanted to look at me, but didn't want anything else to do with me, not talk to me, not touch me, whatever, which was fine by me. But anyway, that went on till the end of the year. And then I quit that band and I went back to playing rock and roll and whatever else was going on. And then long time later, it dawned on me, Daryl, the answer to your question that's been plaguing you since the age of 10, how can you hate me when you don't even know me, fell right into your lap and you didn't even realize it. Who better to ask that question of than someone who would go so far as to join an organization that has over 100-year history of practicing hating those who do not look like them and who do not believe as they believe. Get back in contact with that guy and see if he will hook you up with the Klan leader for the state of Maryland, which is where I live now. I'm originally from Chicago. But anyway, and then interview that guy. Go up north, go down south, go to the Midwest, go to the West, and interview other Klan leaders and members and find out the answer to your question and then write a book about it, because your book will be the first book written by a Black author who has sat down with members of the KKK face to face and interviewed them. There had been 2 books out of all the books written on the Klan, 2 books written by Black authors that dealt with the Klan, but each author detailed how he escaped a lynching, one in the 1930s and one in the 1940s, but not from the perspective of sitting down face to face and interviewing their would-be lynchers. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. So long story short, that's exactly what I did. And I'm going to give you two things that I learned from these experiences. I had my I got in contact with that guy, and I had him give me the phone number and address to the leader here in Maryland, so I could interview him. This man warned me. He did not want to give me the guy's information, and I had to beg and plead for about 20 minutes. And finally, he gave it to me on the condition that I not reveal to this leader where I got his information. I said, okay. And he warned me, he said, Daryl, do not fool with this guy. His name is Roger Kelly, the leader. Do not fool with Roger Kelly. He will kill you. And I said, well, that's exactly why I need to see him. Why would he want to kill me? That's what I need to know. So he gave me that warning. I left. I had my secretary give Mr. Kelly a call and not tell him that I was Black, and ask him, would he be willing to sit down with her boss and give him an interview for a book he's writing. I figured if he knew I was Black, he wouldn't give me a chance, but I wanted him to see me face to face before he declined me. So she said, okay. So she called him up, and he agreed to do the interview. He didn't ask what color I was. And so we set it up in this motel room up in Frederick. And Mary, my secretary, and we got there early, and I got some soda pop out of the machine down the hall and had Mary put it inside the ice bucket, get it all cold, so I could be hospitable and offer my guest a cold beverage when he arrived. I had no idea what this man was going to do when he saw me. Would he attack me? Would he simply say, I'm not talking to you, and turn around and walk away? Or would he come in my room as he agreed and sit down and be interviewed? Anyway, regardless, I was going to be hospitable myself and offer him a cold drink. So we got that all set. So right on time, there was a knock on the door. Now, the way the room just happens to be situated is if you were standing in the hallway of this motel, right there in the doorway, you cannot see who is in the room. You have to come into the room, turn around the corner, and the room is laid out back there. So you cannot see who's in the room from the hallway. So I had placed myself in the most obscure corner of the room, so Mr. Kelly would have to walk into the room before he would see me. I took the little lamp table, took the lamp off, and put the table in the corner of the room with a chair on one side for Mr. Kelly and a chair on this side for me. And I had a little black canvas bag beside me. And in my bag, I had a cassette recorder, which I placed on the table, all in hopes that Mr. Kelly would allow me to record the conversation if he did come in the room. And I had some blank cassettes in there. And I also had a copy of the Bible. because the Ku Klux Klan claims to be a Christian organization, and they claim that the Bible preaches racial separation. Now, I'd never seen that in there, so I want to be able to pull out my Bible and say, here, Mr. Kelly, please show me chapter and verse where it says blacks and whites must be separate. So I'm all prepared. Right on time, 5:15, knock, knock, knock. Mary hops up, runs around the corner, opens the door. In walks what is known as the Grand Nighthawk. That means bodyguard to the Grand Dragon. Nighthawk is a bodyguard or security. Grand means state level. Grand, like we would call the leader of our state, the governor. They call theirs the Grand Dragon. A national leader would be called, which we call the president. They call the Imperial Wizard. So Roger Kelly at the time was a Grand Dragon. He would later become an Imperial Wizard. So anyway, she opens the door, in walks this Grand Nighthawk. He's dressed in military camouflage with that same Ku Klux Klan emblem right there, the initials KKK over here, and Knights of the Ku Klux Klan were embroidered on his cap. And he had a semi-automatic handgun on his hip in a holster. He comes in, and Mr. Kelly is walking directly behind him in a dark blue suit and tie. And when the Nighthawk turned the corner and saw me, he froze. And Mr. Kelly did not realize this guy had stopped and walked right into his back and knocked him forward. So now they're stumbling around trying to regain their balance. And I'm just sitting at the table, like, looking at them and watching, their facial expressions. And man, I can tell you what, you could read their faces like a highway billboard sign. They were thinking, did the desk clerk give us the wrong room number? Or it's just an ambush or what? So I realized the apprehension. So I stood up and I displayed my hands to show I had nothing in my hands. And I walked forward and I said, hi, Mr. Kelly, I'm Daryl Davis. He shook my hand and the Nighthawk shook my hand. So far, so good. I said, come on in, please, have a seat. So, Mr. Kelly came in, had a seat, and the Nighthawk stood at attention to his right. And I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit. We got into the interview. He allowed me to record. And every time my cassette would run out of tape, I'd reach down into my bag to get a fresh cassette. Or he made some biblical reference. I'd reach down into my bag to get the Bible out and hand it to him. Every time I reached down, the Nighthawk would reach up to his gun. Now, he never pulled the gun, but he put his hand on the handle. And I understood, what was going on. His job is to, protect his boss. He doesn't know me. He doesn't know what's in that bag. So he's doing his job. And I understood that. I didn't freak out about it. And after a while, he realized there was no threat in the bag. And he relaxed. I went in and out of the bag. The Nighthawk didn't move. So we're talking, for a little bit. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there was a very fast, very quick noise, very short, like a ch-ch. That was it. That was all there was to it. And we all jumped. And I just knew that Mr. Kelly had made that noise. How did I know that? Because I didn't make it. So if I didn't make it, he had to have made it. And because it was so short and so fast, my ear could not discern what it was. So therefore, I perceived it to be an ominous, threatening noise. And so I feared for my life. And so I'm ready to protect myself and protect my secretary, because this man had made some weird noise that I didn't know, couldn't explain. He's the head of the Klan. I'm a black guy. I'm already told, don't fool with him. He's going to kill me. So I came up out of my chair. I was ready to pounce across that table and attack him and attack the Nighthawk, take away the night. My main concern was disarming the Nighthawk, take away his gun. So I was going to take them both down to the ground and disarm the Nighthawk. And I came up and I hit the table, and I'm looking right into Mr. Kelly's eyes. And I did not say one word. My eyes spoke loud and clearly for me. My eyes were saying to him, what did you just do? His eyes had fixated on my eyes. And he didn't say one word either, but I could read his eyes. His eyes were saying to me, what did you just do? And the Nighthawk was like this with his hand back on his gun, looking at both of us like, what did either one of you all just do? Well, Mary, she was sitting on top of the dresser because there were no more chairs. And she realized what had happened. And she began explaining it to us again when it happened again. The ice in the ice bucket had begun melting, and the cans of soda were shifting down the ice. That was it, you know? And we all began laughing at how ignorant we all were. And it was kind of a bittersweet moment. I mean, on one hand, somebody could have gotten shot over an ice cube. But on the other hand, it was ridiculous that we all became afraid over the noise of an ice cube melting and cans of soda shifting, you know? And I won't say this was a learning moment at the time. That would come later. It was a teaching moment. And the lesson taught is this: all because some foreign, and underscore, highlight, circle the word foreign, entity of which we were ignorant, that being the bucket of ice and cans of soda, had entered into our little comfort zone at the table via the noise that it made, and we didn't know what it was. We were ignorant of it. We became fearful of one another. All right? Ignorance breeds fear. We fear those things we don't understand. And that fear turns into accusations and blame. We want to blame somebody else for what we're afraid of. And so if you don't keep that fear in check, that fear in turn will escalate and breed hatred, because we hate the things that frighten us. And that hatred then turns into anger and escalates and breeds destruction. So we saw the whole chain almost unravel to completion. It stopped short of that last component, destruction. You know, had the Nighthawk pulled out his gun and shot somebody, namely me or my secretary, or had I pounced across the table and hurt one of them. So it stopped just short of that. But we did see, everybody here saw that whole chain of events go from beginning to completion. 3 years ago, on August 12th, 2017, in Charlottesville, Virginia, at the large Unite the Right white supremacist rally. On that day, August 12th, 2017, there was a lot of ignorance in Charlottesville. There was a lot of fear in Charlottesville. There was a lot of hatred in Charlottesville. And what did it culminate in? It culminated in destruction when a white supremacist got inside his vehicle and tried to murder as many counter-protesters as he could by driving full force into the crowd. He succeeded in injuring 20 people and murdering one young lady named Heather Heyer. So ignorance breeds fear, fear breeds hatred, hatred breeds destruction. Now, how can we combat that? How can we combat it without violence? Personally, I think we've been doing things kind of backwards. We've been starting at the top with our destruction. Let's forget about the destruction. That is a symptom. The next level down is hatred. Let's forget about the hatred. That too is a symptom. Fear, next level down. Forget about the fear. That is a symptom. The root cause of all this is ignorance. If we cure the ignorance, then there's nothing to fear. We only fear that of which we're ignorant. So if we cure the ignorance, there's nothing to fear. With nothing to fear, there's nothing to hate. With nothing to hate, there is nothing to destroy. And the good thing about it is there is a cure for ignorance. That cure is called education. Education and exposure. And that is what we need to focus on, educating one another. And how do we do that? By getting together with one another. We spend way too much time in this country talking about the other person or talking at the other person or talking past the other person. Why don't we spend a little bit of time talking with the other person? Now, I'm going to give you a quick example of that. So in this interview that I was doing with Mr. Kelly, I asked him, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And some of the answers he gave a whole litany of things, but I'm going to zero in on a few of them. He told, well, Mr. Davis, Black people are prone to crime. And, this is evidenced by the fact that there are more Black people in prison than there are white people. Well, okay, that's true, but it's a half-truth. There are indeed more Black people in prison than white people, but he's not considering the imbalance of our judicial system and the fact that there are plenty of poor white people and Black people in prison. And the only reason they're there is because they could not afford adequate legal representation. And they may have taken a plea to something they didn't even do. And there they are. So I'm listening. And then he says, Black people are inherently lazy, that we don't want to work. We prefer to scam the government welfare system. We always have our hand out for a free handout. I'm sitting back, I'm listening. Then he goes on to say that Black people are born with a smaller brain than white people. White people have a larger brain. And the larger the brain, the more space for intelligence, the more capacity. So I'm listening to all this. And he tells me that this is evidenced by the fact that that Black students consistently score lower on the SATs than white kids do. Okay, that's true too, but it's a half-truth. He's not considering, where do most Black kids go to school? In the inner city. Most white kids go to school not in the inner city. The educational system in the inner city is not as good as it is in the suburbs. That's a fact. And I can tell you something. The Black kids who go to school in the suburbs score just fine on the SATs, as high or higher than a lot of white kids. White kids who go to school in the inner city also score very low on the SATs. It's not the kids, white or Black. It's the educational system. The quality of it is poorer in the inner city than it is in the suburbs. But these are things he doesn't see or take into consideration. What he sees are the results, and that fits his narrative. Now, here's what happens. Is what he is saying to me offensive? Of course it is, absolutely. Am I offended by what he said? That I'm a criminal, I'm lazy, and I'm not that intelligent? No, I'm not offended one bit. Why? Because what he is saying is not true. Why would I be offended by an untruth? He doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know me. He just met me 5-10 minutes ago. And he's assessing this based upon the color of my skin. Why should I believe an untruth and be offended by it? Too many people, we let our emotions get in front of us when we're trying to have a conversation with somebody who may be on the opposite side of what we believe. And this is what we need to do. We need to keep our emotions in check. All right? Don't be offended by something somebody tells you about yourself when you know yourself and they just met you. Don't let that get in front of you and ruin a potentially productive conversation. So I'm not offended by that. And what I tell him, that now, when he first came in the room, and he was expecting a white guy to be interviewing him, right? And he sees me, his wall went right up because I'm the enemy. So that wall is up. So he's never been in a situation where he meets an adversary and he says all these things and the adversary does not push back within the first 45 seconds. And then the conversation just spirals downward and it's over and nothing is accomplished because one is attacking the other. So remember what I said, people want to be heard and they want to be respected. I'm allowing him to be heard. I'm respecting him to say what he wants to say. That does not mean that I respect what he says. I did not respect what he says, but I respected his right to say it. Now, if my mother or father told me, Daryl, I think you're prone to crime, or you're lazy, or you're not very bright. Maybe I would take that into consideration, because they raised me, they brought me into this world. But somebody who just met me 5-10 minutes ago, not a chance. All right. So I'm going to just sit back and listen to them. Now, when that wall is up, what you want to do is you want to be heard, just like they want to be heard. But nobody is going to hear you when their wall is up. You try to plant a seed, it hits that wall and bounces right back on your side. So you need that wall to come down. So as you're giving that person respect by listening to him, allowing him to be heard, that wall is coming down. All right. So now I let him get it all out, and then the wall is down. And when he finishes spewing all this vitriol, he feels compelled to reciprocate and let me have the opportunity to say what I want to say. So then I could go on the attack and offend, go on the offense, and I would be well within my right. I could say, no, you're the one who's a criminal. You're the one who's hanging black men from trees, and you're the one walking into black churches and bombing them and setting them on fire, and so forth and so on. And I would be right. But I'm not going to attack him. What I'm going to do is defend myself, as I did, explain to him, listen, I don't have a criminal record. Nobody in my family does. I've never been on welfare. Nobody in my family has. My SAT scores were fine. They got me into college, and I have a bachelor's degree. My mother and father both had master's degrees. My father was working on his PhD. Now, I'm not attacking him. I'm just defending myself and my family, all right? Because if I attacked him, then that wall would go back up. So when the wall is down, he's hearing what I'm saying. And I can tell you this is exactly what happens, because I've heard it time and time again when these people give up and renounce that ideology and they give me their robes and hoods, all right? They go home and they think about, man, I just had a 3-hour conversation with a black guy and we didn't fight. I mean, we disagreed on some stuff, but we didn't fight, And what he said about such and such, it made sense. Oh, but he's black. But what he said was true. Oh, but he's black. So they're having a cognitive dissonance. They know that what I said was true, either because they researched it or they already know it, but they don't want to believe it because the source was black. So it becomes a dilemma for them. Do I disregard this guy's skin color and believe the truth and change my path? Or do I consider his skin color and keep on living a lie because I don't want to acknowledge him? That becomes a cognitive dissonance dilemma for them. And in the end, they have to decide what they want to do. And in many cases, not all, but many cases, they have gone the right way. I've been doing this for 36 years. It'll be 37 years next year. And that's what happens. And Roger Kelly went on from Grand Dragon to Imperial Wizard, national leader. And then he renounced his ideology and the Klan and apologized to me for even being in it. Today, I own his robe and hood. And I have a ton of robes and hoods from these conversations. These are hard conversations to have, but we must remember people want to be heard. People want to be respected. They want to be loved. They want to be treated fairly. And they want the same things for their families as we want for our families. And if we can put our emotions in check and remember that what is driving all of this is ignorance. And let's address the ignorance through conversation and through education, because we all have a lot to teach and we all have a lot to learn. And that doesn't happen until we sit around and have conversations with each other, not about each other, not at each other, not past each other. So we need to stop preaching to the choir and start talking to other people, bring them into the fold. And that's how we grow and how they grow, and we grow together. Thank you all very much.
And let's open it up first, Daryl, to you. And friends, if you have questions for Mr. Davis, put them on the chat feed that's available on your Zoom, and then I'll share with those out of those with Daryl. Thank you, friends.
Well, I'm open to answering anything you all would like to ask.
Let's see. Daryl, here's the question. How many other KKK leaders have you spoken with?
Oh my goodness. I've spoken with quite a number, over 200 people around the country have left the organization. Not all of them are leaders. Probably maybe 5 or 6 leaders so far. But I've had a ton of members leave, and I have quite a collection of robes and hoods. I don't have quite 200, but I probably have about 57 or so. But I have other things they've given me: flags, belt buckles, you name it.
It's been amazing for me when we've been in person and you've pulled those out of your suitcase, those robes. Really quite powerful. Daryl, you and I reconnected after I read about your film being featured at the South by Southwest Film Festival. Tell us about that.
Yes. Ever since my book came out, people have been contacting me wanting to do, a documentary or something like that, and I would just send their request to my attorney, and we finally settled on one of them, that looked pretty good. And this producer and director got the bid, and they produced a documentary on me. They followed me around the country, interviewing neo-Nazi leaders and KKK leaders. And the film is called Accidental Courtesy, and it was entered into the South by Southwest Film Festival, and totally it won 6 awards between South by Southwest and some other film festivals. So then it got shown on PBS, and they keep showing it on PBS. It's kind of a bittersweet thing again because it was shown on there initially, and then anytime there's like a racial disturbance, they'll show that film. So hopefully, it's helping people. I hope there'll be a time when they don't need to show the film, but they do that whenever there's a racial disturbance.
Sure. Did you tell us the name of the book, Daryl?
Yeah, the name of the book is Clandestine Relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my first book. I just finished writing my second book. My second book will have most of the stuff from the first book, plus updates and new stories. And so the second book will be called The Klan Whisperer. And it's going through the editing process now.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, as a musician, I'm going to focus on this question that was asked. Let's see. Do you think music has helped you learn to listen so well? And I would say also as a point of engagement.
Oh yes, absolutely. I mean, music is the great uniter, and my degree is in jazz, and as I told you in my story, just a few minutes back, I played country music also, but I also play a lot of rock and roll, and I played piano for the man who invented rock and roll for 32 years, the late great Chuck Berry, and you know rock and roll is a very undercredited uh, entity in the civil rights movement. Okay, while Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and many other great black and white civil rights activists, conducted marches and boycotts and sit-ins and protests and demonstrations in order to bring white adults and black adults together. Rock and roll people, the rock and roll pioneers like Chuck Berry, Elvis Presley, Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis, Fats Domino, Buddy Holly. These people were achieving that, bringing white youth and black youth together with their music. because back in the day, theaters were segregated if they allowed Black people in at all. There were seating sections with ropes going around the sections with signs hanging down that would say seating for white patrons only, colored seating only, and you had to sit in your designated seating section. So, John, if you and I went to go see Frank Sinatra back in the day, or the Glenn Miller Orchestra, or the Dorsey Brothers, or whoever, if I was allowed in, you and I would not be able to sit together. I had to sit in my section, and you sat in your section, as designated by our skin color. How crazy is that? But that was the law. They were called Jim Crow laws, and people obeyed the law. They didn't cross sit, because if they did, they would be arrested, just like Rosa Parks on the bus. All right. Now, in the 1950s, two phenomenons happened: the invention of rock and roll by Chuck Berry, all right, and then popularized by Elvis and all these other people. And the second thing was when these guys came out on stage playing this new music that these kids had never heard before. It even had a different beat. It had a backbeat, boom, boom, bop, boom, boom, bop, right? As opposed to the swing, had a real stronger beat, right? Black kids and white kids alike could not sit still. And they bounced up out of their chairs and began boogieing and dancing in the aisles together for the first time in the history of this country. Music caused that, caused Black kids and white kids to dance together. And that's why I say rock and roll was undercredited in bringing people together.
Incredible. Thank you. Now, when you meet with KKK leaders, is your goal to have them leave?
No, absolutely not. Um, that was never my goal. And I don't, when you see my name in the media, it always says, Black musician converts X number of KKK people or whatever. That's not true. I did not even convert one. I am the impetus for a little over 200 to be converted, but they converted themselves. I simply gave them reason to think about it, and they decided to do this. I was never going to meet with them initially to convert them. I simply want to know, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? Just tell me that. That's all I want to know. And as we conversed and we began to humanize one another, they began to see things differently, and they began leading on their own. And it happened the first time, it surprised me. Then it happened again and again and again. I thought, oh my goodness, I'm onto something. I need to keep these conversations going. And that was my goal.
Yes, incredible. And if I could make a commentary on that, I would say much more focused on the process of listening than a particular goal at the end of the conversation.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
Precisely.
And how about ongoing contacts with those KKK members today?
Yes, some of them who've come out also travel with me, and go on stage with me and lecture about the dangers and pitfalls that come with joining those organizations. So they're being proactive and advising parents what to look out for, with their kids, so they don't succumb to these kind of temptations. And they're trying to help get people out of those groups as well. I'm still ongoing with active members as well.
Amazing. And I was struck by an earlier story you had told about being, I guess, presenting the bride at
Oh,
a
yeah.
Virginia wedding.
Yeah.
That was quite a story there. Let me see here what else we have. As we individually and as a parish, as a state and nation are addressing painful histories, and some of us realize some of these racist parts of our family background. Anything that you would suggest we do in terms of, I guess, breaking away, or here we are in church making atonement or repentance for that past?
Sure. I take it some of the things you're referring to are some of the Confederate monuments and statues and things like that as part of that racist past, where they've been honored for a number of years. Um, here's my stance on that. As I mentioned earlier, I was born in Chicago, but I have roots in Virginia. My parents both were born in Virginia. They were born in Roanoke and Salem, and so I have Confederate history in me as well. As anybody who knows American history, uh, I think you froze on me there for a second.
Yes.
Okay,
My,
so
can you
yeah,
repeat that?
sure, absolutely. I was saying that I think some of the racist past that you were talking about deals with some of the Confederate statues and monuments and flags and things like that. Yes, I do have some thoughts on that, and this is my personal opinion. I do have Confederate history in me as well. I'm a descendant of slaves, and even though I was born in Chicago, as I indicated earlier, I do have roots in Virginia. Both my parents were born in Virginia, in Roanoke and Salem, Virginia. And anybody who knows American history also knows that black slaves had to fight for their slave masters. So there were slaves in my family who fought in the Confederacy. Now, while I honor my ancestors because without them I wouldn't be here, I personally do not honor the Confederacy or condone slavery in the least. And here's what I feel about the monuments. Yes, they should come down. They should not be ripped down and torn up and all that kind of thing. I think they should be taken down and placed in a museum or build a Confederate memorial park and go put them over there. And people who want to go and see them and honor them or whatever can do it over there. They don't belong on public property. The one of the reasons being is simply this: we went to war against Great Britain and we won that war, which is why we celebrate the 4th of July. There are plenty of white Americans in this country of British descent. So, do they go out here and build statues to King George III and fly the Union Jack? No. Great Britain lost that war. On December 7th, 1941, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. We went to war against Japan. We won that war too. There are plenty of Japanese Americans. They don't go out here and build statues to Emperor Hirohito and fly the Japanese flag. The loser does not get to build his statues or fly his flags on the winner's land. All right. So we went to war in World War II against Germany and we won. There are plenty of German Americans in this country or Americans of German descent who have ancestry who were in the Third Reich because they had no choice. If you lived there, you were under the dictatorship of Adolf Hitler, unless you escaped to Poland or something. So these German Americans don't go out there and build statues to Joseph Goebbels or Adolf Hitler and fly swastikas, unless they're neo Nazis or something. So the loser does not get to build his statues and monuments and fly his flags on the winner's land. Guess what? The Confederacy lost the war. They need to get over it. They don't need to fly their statues or their flags, or build their statues and fly their flags. Take them and put them in a Confederate memorial park or in a museum because it is American history. We all have history, good, bad, ugly, and shameful, and we don't need to omit any of it. We need to be upfront about it and put it where it belongs so people can learn from it. That's my opinion.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Thank you. And I know you are a leader in this work and speaking with KKK members. Is there anyone else, or are there others out there that are actively doing that from the Black community? Perhaps you've inspired someone or others.
Oh, I'm sure there are. Yeah, I'm sure there are people who do it, and and I've met some Jewish people as well who do this, and other people. Um, some people address the systemic component of racism in our country. I address the individuals and groups and things like that. But it all needs to be done. But what's most important is that we, because racism is a multifaceted thing, and there is no one cure-all for it. We have to treat it different ways and address each facet of it. What's important is that we all cooperate and coordinate with each other, because we all are Americans, and we cannot say, I'm not my brother's keeper. We should say, I am my brother's keeper, so we all educate one another and learn from each other.
Absolutely. Well, and thinking about learning, Daryl, we have a professor here from Western Frederick County, and your name has come up to be invited as a speaker there. So watch for that reach out.
Okay.
And I want to honor your time. We're getting close now to the time that you allotted to us at St. Anne's.
I'm fine.
In terms of that learning and teaching, what would you recommend in our own families, either adult to adult children, or to youngsters, in terms of um, of teaching these ideals and these values, instilling in them?
What I would encourage people to do is not try to tell one another what to think, but let's instill how to think. How to think. Give our youth an option. Give them plenty of options. Show them things, and help them to determine, uh, you know, how to make a decision so that they can learn on their own rather than us try to implant and compel them to learn a certain way. When you and I think you and I are around the same age, um, and when you and I were kids, and we watched the news with Walter Cronkite and Huntley and Brinkley and those people, Barbara Walters, we got the news. Today we watch the news, all we're getting are opinions. And it almost seems as though the newscasters must think, we're not bright enough to figure things out on our own, so they have to tell us, what to think by injecting their opinions on current events. So we need to tell people, get back to telling people how to think as opposed to what to think.
Super. I know when you and I first got together in a church over in Howard County, that was one of the early white churches, I guess, to have you speak at. And in your time working with churches, particularly white suburban churches, what have you seen them do in terms of responding against racism? I mean, we want to learn from you and your incredible experience.
Yeah, I'll tell you two things. Um, One, there was this Klansman. He was vehemently anti-Semitic and very racist and very violent. His name was Johnny Lee Clary, Clary. He died a few years ago. And Johnny Lee Clary, before he died, he renounced the Klan and white supremacy and that ideology, and he became a minister, an ordained minister, and he began bringing everybody, black, white, everybody together to his sermons, and he was adamant about, not just atoning on Sunday and then acting up Monday through Saturday or something. And so he had a saying in his sermons, which was, "You can't be a Sunday saint and a Monday ain't." but also, we have to remember, if we're going to be, if you accept me as your brother in Christ, will you also accept me as your brother-in-law?
Wow, powerful. What else do you have to share with us that we haven't had the wisdom to ask you?
Ask away, whatever, I don't have any restrictions.
Let me go back over here. A few questions, and uh, this was focusing again on education, Daryl.
Mhm.
Uh, with the while education is beneficial, do you feel that much of education and or books read is being transferred from heads to hearts? I guess the academic getting here, and in terms of changing hearts.
I think exposure changes hearts. You know, the the books change academics. You learn. That way. You have academic knowledge, but when you engage with people, then you get empirical knowledge, exposure. We need both education and exposure. I had a benefit of a lot of travel, but today, you don't have to have all the travel that I had. You can go on the internet and communicate with people. You can travel to places sitting in your living room on your computer. One of my one of my very favorite quotes of all time is called the Travel Quote, and it's by Mark Twain. And Mark Twain said, "Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime." And that is so true.
Wow.
So, and speaking of travel, here's what I see in a lot of cosmopolitan cities, say for example, like DC or Arlington, Virginia, or wherever, Baltimore, Philadelphia, wherever, Los Angeles. You have a diverse group of people, let's say working at a company or going to college together, whatever, high school even. Um, you have all these different people in a company working. They might even work in the same cubicle. They might even be working on the same project. But what happens at 12 noon? They go downstairs to the cafeteria, and blacks go sit with blacks, Hispanics go sit with Hispanics, whites sit with whites. That's called self segregation. Now, does that mean that they're racist? No, that doesn't mean that at all. People tend to feel more comfortable around others who share the same language or who share the same culture and things like that. It doesn't make them racist. Now, if they deny somebody else from sitting at their table, then that might cross the line into racism or something, discrimination at least. So what I say is this: once or twice a week, walk across the cafeteria, travel across the cafeteria, and sit with someone who you don't normally sit with. Sit with someone who does not look like you, who may not worship where you worship or speak the same language as you do. Just sit with them and have lunch. And that will open up some things because I tell you what, I give anywhere from 60 to 80 lectures a year in between my music gigs all over the country and around the world, mostly colleges and universities, and sometimes corporations and things like that. But I'll tell you this: 2 to 3 out of every 10 lectures that I give, say at a college, this will happen. I'll do my lecture, I'll do the Q&A, and at the end of the Q&A, some of the students will still come to the podium to ask, a few more questions, or they want to touch one of the robes or whatever. There will be 2 or 3 out of 10 times there'll be one student standing over there in the distance, not doing anything, but just milling around. And so I've come to realize what's going to happen. He or she is waiting for the crowd around me to go away. So when the crowd goes away, and I'm packing up my robes and whatever else I brought with me, he or she will walk over, and they'll like look around and to make sure nobody's within earshot, and they'll say, I enjoyed your lecture, Mr. Davis. You know, my mother is in the Klan, or my father's a neo-Nazi, and things like that. And I was raised like that, and now I'm here at University of wherever, and I'm dating a Jewish guy, or my girlfriend is black, or my boyfriend is Muslim or whatever, and I can't bring this person home, my parents will kill me. My parents will disown me. And I don't want to tell my friend because they'll drop me. So they've got this secret, that is burning on their chest, causing an ulcer, and they need to get it out. So I'm the perfect person for them to come to and talk. And so I see that, 2 to 3 out of every 10 lectures. And here's what happens in a neighborhood. Where they come from is pretty homogenous, and they go to the same school, read the same books, cheer for the same sports team, vote for the same politicians, shop in the same grocery store. Everything is pretty much the same. And now they come to this college or university. The neighborhood does not come with them. There are neighborhoods there from all over the country. There may even be people from different countries there. So now they're getting all kinds of exposure, and they're seeing things that they never saw in their own neighborhood, and they're beginning to see that some of the things their parents told them, or they gathered from their own experiences in their neighborhood, are simply not true. So exposure and education, one exposure being empirical, the other being the educational component being academic, is what cures that ignorance and propels someone forward. Because when one person changes, it changes a generation. And when I first got into this kind of thing, oh, I'm sure everybody here at church um, has heard at one time or another as kids, we all heard it, that a tiger does not change its stripes, a leopard does not change its spots. So I had that in mind. Why would I think that a Klansman would change his robe and hood? So, well, here's what I found out. I was wrong. Um, a Klansman can change his robe and hood, and I've proven it many, many times. And so that goes against the tiger and the leopard. Well, here's the thing. People are right. A tiger does not change his stripes. A leopard does not change its spots. But that's because the leopard and tiger were born with their spots and stripes. A Klansman was not born with his robe and hood. That is learned behavior. So racism is learned. So what can be learned can also be unlearned.
Yes. Oh, thank you. I know recently there's been a fair amount of attention on a gentleman, Derek Black,
Yes.
who had been kind of groomed
Mhm.
as you were describing, and from a family with generations of white nationalist focus and leadership,
Mhm.
and went to school, opened up, encountered a new experience, and changed his trajectory.
Right. He changed with some Jewish kids.
Yes, yes, and so with that engagement with individuals in conversation, and you had commented on ignorance, and what kind of pushback do you get to that? What
Well,
I could,
I get pushback from all kinds of people. A lot from the Black community. Um, People who know me, know what I stand for, know what I'm all about. There are some people who totally disagree with what I do, and I've seen that, and I get that. Um, like for example, if I were to open up a magazine or see somebody on TV that looks like me, a Black person, shaking hands with somebody in a robe and hood, or see a picture of that in a magazine article, I'd have a visceral reaction like, what the heck is going on here? And but me, I'd want to hear the story. I want to read the story, the paragraph, find out the article, find out why is this person doing that. Oh, okay, I get it now. Yeah, that's pretty cool. But some people, they see that and have that visceral reaction and jump to their own conclusion without looking into it. And okay, and then they began calling me an Uncle Tom, an Oreo, a race trader, a sellout. I've been called every name but my own. So, but some of those people have come back to me and said, "Hey, man, I'm really sorry about that. You know, I've looked into you and I get it now. I understand." I've had that happen recently, but some people will never change. They'll go to their grave being hateful, violent, and racist on both sides. It's difficult to see somebody sitting down with someone who has historically been your oppressor. But you know, if you want change, you have to make it. And we all have to ask ourselves this question, because our society can only become one of two things. Our society can become that which we sit back and let it become, or it can become that which we stand up and make it become. So we have to ask ourselves the question, do I want to sit back and see what my society becomes, or do I want to stand up and make my society become what I want to see? And I've chosen the latter. And that's a personal decision for each and every one of us.
Mm, thank you. Thank you. I'm busy taking notes here. Are there any other comments or thoughts that you would like to add? And what I'll then do, Daryl, is close this out with a prayer.
Okay. Well, I want to wish everybody all the very best, and I hope each and every one of you has had something to take away from today. And I really, really appreciate St. Anne's Church and Laura and John inviting me here to share with you all. I'm very humbled. I hope one day we can do it again, hopefully in person. And so my website is daryldavis.com. You know, if you think of questions that you wish you'd asked earlier and all of a sudden remembered it later on, email me. It's daryl@daryldavis.com.
Thank you. You are always welcome here at St. Anne's.